hope you get there. And I hope you get there and
I
you
hope I
get
get
back
home too.
and get back and go home, back and forth. I hope it keeps going until February of next year.
That's quite old. Is your Social Security still paying?
Well, as you well know, we routinely send checks out to 382-year-olds for Social Security because there are no safeguards or stops in place to stop us from doing that. I'm sure you've heard by now.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
That voice belongs to Larry Schultz, Friday 5 member. Good morning, Lawrence.
Great to be here.
We have the Admiral back from the first half hour.
Rob, great to be here again.
Jason Barrett back in the old chair we used to call the fat chair back in the day when there was one camera and it was right in front of this chair. Whoever was in it looked like they were like 800 pounds because they were the first figure in the room.
And somehow I always got stuck in it. I don't know how.
Well,
that happened.
either that or you ran to that chair, Jason.
I don't know what it is, but I'm happy to be back in it.
The mogul is here, Michael Hornby.
Good morning, Rob.
Via telephone, Joseph Joey Torts Ferretti.
Good morning, fellas.
All right, I have.
Don't sound so enthused, Joe.
He did sound up low-key, didn't he?
That's what happens
Wake
when you
up,
just
Joe.
hit the mute button before you had to speak.
Hey, maybe he did, right? So I got two Steeler fans in the room with me. I'm going to get some Aaron Rodgers opinions right now. Joe, I'm going to go to you first. Aaron Rodgers should be, if the contract is finally signed and dried, the Steelers starting quarterback this upcoming year. What do you think?
I think we're in for a year's worth of soap opera type conduct.
As opposed to
it's
what?
funny. The New York papers are applauding the fact that Aaron Rodgers is now Pittsburgh's problem. So I think that says it all.
It kind of reminds me of when Jim Justice flipped from Democrat to Republican, and Jason Barrett at the time said, "Okay, he's your problem now."
Yeah. Then I signed up for him to be my problem again.
You rejoined the team. Jason, your thoughts?
Well, yesterday afternoon I received the notification on my phone that Aaron Rodgers was joining the Pittsburgh Steelers. 3 hours later, I received a notification that the Steelers have been eliminated from playoff contention. And I've said this a couple of weeks ago. I would rather go 2-15 with Will Howard than I would 9-8 with Aaron Rodgers. And that's not just because you're playing for a top draft pick, but I want to see what Will Howard brings. What is he? I mean, he's kind of an unknown commodity. I know what Aaron Rodgers is. He's 41 years old. He's going to stumble through 17 games. He's going to get worse as the season goes on, and they may make the playoffs and lose in the first round, or they may go 9-8 or 8-9 and end up with a middle of the round draft pick.
This couldn't happen to a better fan base.
Amen.
Makes me laugh.
Got some soap opera music underneath the little soap opera organ going on there. And then for the scary parts,
I know it's entertaining when it happens to a fan base who comes from a culture of winning.
I know. I get it.
Not something that you're used to.
You can be just like the Dallas fan base when we were winning.
hey, no losing records in the last 20 years. None. Not one. Not a single one.
My favorite part about this, their first game is at the Jets.
Yes, it is.
Well, at least you know you got to win. You're guaranteed a win.
Well, I don't know. They might be seeing an upgrade in their quarterback position.
They're still the Jets.
I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't understand all the hand-wringing. I've been a Steeler fan since birth, 1963, grew up in Pittsburgh. I don't understand all the hand-wringing over the Aaron Rodgers thing. I really honestly don't. There are Steeler fans who are like, I'm never watching them again. You know, and then missing a joke. The franchise is a joke. He embarrassed us, making us wait 2 months. What do you care? Go to your job during the day. When they kick off in September, you're going to be watching. What do you care what happens between February and September? Who cares?
That's why the Steeler fan base creates such joy for people like me who are not a part of it when something like this happens.
It's
There
ridiculous.
are 30 other teams across the United States that don't have the winning record and the rings that you have and the success the
And the
Steelers
expectation.
have. And every year you have the expectation of winning. We're just trying to make it to the end of the season.
You're a Chargers fan.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't get the angst over this whole thing. I never will. You know, live your life. You can't live your life based on 50-something people you've never met who don't care about you, who aren't going to pay your bills if you get hospitalized, right?
But I do think there may be some fear in any organization that he plays for that he's a thing that even in high school football we used to call locker room poison. He's kind of I don't think his teammates from the other teams that he played for are praying for his success just because he's such a great guy.
I don't know how much is made of that or not, Larry.
Yeah.
In that documentary about him on Netflix, there weren't any teammates who complained about him on camera. There are a lot of teammates who praised him on camera. If you watch that documentary, and even so, I mean, think about all the locker rooms in the past that have had fighting and still won championships, right? You don't have to like each other. It's professional sports. It's not high school. You just got to make sure you get your paycheck and you do your job.
Is it going to be any worse than Antonio Brown and George Pickens?
Really? Can he? Seriously? I mean, we had Michael Vick on the team for, 2 years?
Yeah.
Michael Vick was a quarterback for the Steelers, got in game. My biggest problem with Michael Vick, he couldn't play anymore when they signed him. Right? If you're waiting for 55 people who are going to get sainthood when they retire, then you're never going to root for a football team, period. These are young, aggressive people at the height of their testosterone pumping careers.
Well, except for Aaron Rodgers.
He's
With the exception of Aaron Rodgers.
He's not
verbally aggressive.
He's not that old.
He's 41, which is Jason's age. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
But Rob, these examples you guys are pulling up, Antonio Brown, George Pickens, Michael Vick, I mean, some would argue that's a reason why the Steelers haven't won a playoff game in 8 years. They got to get guys in there who are singularly focused on winning football games. The Tom Brady mentality. It's all about winning. It's not about going to your dark place and smoking your weed and your mushrooms and doing all that stuff. I mean, it's really focused on winning. And a guy who just signs and shows up at camp, probably out of shape and doesn't know the playbook yet, that's not dedicated to winning. So I think that's where the fans kind of draw a line here.
Well, you know what? Go to work, come back home, do the same thing again the next day, and then in September when they kick off, if you don't like it, don't watch. Right? It's that simple. Don't watch.
Or don't buy the tickets.
Or don't buy the tickets. Yeah, it really comes down to that. This shouldn't be the centerpiece of the stress of your life. It's just not that important. Right? It's not. All right.
They piss me off one day a week, and the other 6, I just don't worry about it.
Yeah, see, there you go. That's it. All right. Joe, with issue number 1, you are the leadoff hitter as always. The microphone is yours, sir.
All right. Maybe this is a little bit more important for our lives. So let's focus on the budget bill that is now in the U.S. Senate. And I want to remind folks that this bill is there under reconciliation, which is a process by which the senators only need to come up with 51 votes to pass it instead of 60. And that's because it's supposed to be purely related to budget and budgetary issues. That's where the word comes from, reconciliation. You're reconciling the federal budget. However, as our U.S. Congress likes to do, this bill is chock full of other stuff. And it's the other stuff I want to focus on because some of it's pretty important. And I think it's a reason why a lot of us should be skeptical about this bill, and maybe we should be rooting for the fact that this U.S. Senate should scrap it and start over. Here's some provisions in the bill that, apart from the main issues of taxes and Medicaid, this is also in the bill. Number 1 is the Restrictions on Judicial Authority Act, which means there will be federal actors, federal employees, federal officials, think of the Trump administration officials, who will no longer be subject to contempt orders from our courts. Our courts do not have armies. The way they enforce their court orders is through the power of contempt. And if you're already a little bit concerned about the Trump administration and other federal officials like the Department of Justice thumbing their nose at federal court orders, this bill makes it a lot worse. Number 2, the REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S, which stands for Regulations from the Executive in Need of Scrutiny. If you're wondering how this is going to work in a government now that is where we really legislate ourselves through executive order, Congress is not passing any laws. The Congress wants to take up more authority to review federal agency regulations. So in this do-nothing Congress, we're going to now vest the power to review seatbelt warning systems and lead in drinking water, and think about food labeling and food inspection, air pollution standards. All of this now is going to be placed in the lap of a Congress that really is not doing anything else. So I wonder how effective that's going to be. The next, and this is a huge issue, AI regulation moratoriums on the states. This bill prohibits the states from regulating in any way artificial intelligence for a period of, get this, 10 years. I'm reading a fascinating book right now about AI. The capacity of artificial intelligence is doubling every 7 months. This is the industrial revolution. This is the internet. This is coming down the road for all of us. And this Congress wants to prohibit the states from regulating in any way artificial intelligence for a period of 10 years. It's unfathomable. There are states already, California, Illinois, New York, who have laws on the books about privacy, about how AI is making automated decisions, and state agencies should review how those decisions are being made because AI is not yet perfect. This bill prohibits the states from doing anything of the sort. And finally, and perhaps the coup de grace here in terms of this U.S. Congress, more money for ICE so that they can build detention centers and so they can have more masked agents out there arresting people, students on campus, people who are running restaurants in Missouri. We need more of those folks out there arresting people and putting them in detention centers, and we need to build more detention centers because our court system is overloaded with these cases and cannot possibly give these people due process. So this bill does those things and more. And my question this morning is, if you think this bill should go through based upon where we are currently on taxes and Medicaid, that's fine. Are these other issues a reason to perhaps object to this bill? Or are these other provisions in the bill reason enough to say, hey, Senate, start over and scrap this thing because this isn't even part of reconciliation. This is substantive law that is being Christmas treed onto this bill so that it gets through Congress. I think some of these provisions are extremely dangerous and are reasons enough to oppose the bill. That's my question.
Joe, that well-known Rhino liberal Marjorie Taylor Greene yesterday said that if she had to do it over again, she would not vote for this bill in the House just on that AI issue alone. I'm not sure if you caught that statement or not.
Yeah. Well, she'll get her chance because the bill's coming back. We'll see what she does.
Bill Stubblefield.
Yeah, Joe, you're making good points, and I think a lot of folks have made similar points. It comes down to me that it's what the CBO has calculated, that over 10 years the deficit will increase by $2.5 trillion. That's going to put us in the range of $40 trillion in debt. And we talk about not wanting to give this to our children or children's children. This is going to do exactly the same thing, going to increase our deficit. Now, they make the argument that we won't really know what we can do until we've done the budget bill. That's where the cuts will come in mind. But there's a do-nothing Congress that tends not to want to induce pain, and one of the pain is cutting a pet project. So I have very little optimism that they're going to make meaningful cuts in the budget, except for those areas that they feel to be that will hurt the blue states. The other thing is we talked to earlier, 11 million people will lose health care, as CBO says. That's been argued with, but still the basic premise is a lot of folks are going to lose health care. You throw on top of that the points that Joe has mentioned, but it comes back to what I alluded to in the very first session. I think it's going to pass. I think this big, beautiful bill, as the president described it, will pass because of one thing. They're making the argument, if it does not pass, taxes are going to be increased more than any time in history. If there is a magic campaign slogan or a magic election, it's just that. Increased taxes. So I think that the Senate is going to pass this basically in the shape it is now with all the warts, and I think there's a lot of warts associated with it.
Mr. Hornby.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's going to pass. Like Bill said, it's a tax cut. So I think there's that. But to address what Joe was saying, the REINS Act is very much like West Virginia's Rulemaking Review Committee. We're leading the country in that. I think the REINS Act is important for the United States. It gives us an opportunity to look at each rule, modify rules, have input in these rules that these agencies are doing. West Virginia's leading that. So if the feds are going to take on some kind of rulemaking review, I'm all for it. Joe said something about AI being revolutionary. I don't think I want to follow California, Illinois, and New York. So if we need to take some restrictions off, let this revolutionary technology start to work and see where it can take the human race, I think it'd be great. So I don't have a problem with that. As far as the immigration, I think yes, we need more money for immigration. I wish our immigration agents didn't have to wear masks, but they do because the cartels go after their families and identify them, and the press does the same thing. This is a big, beautiful bill. I'm all for it. So.
Mr. Schultz.
Let me first say that Marjorie Taylor Greene did not read the bill and went to a town hall or said on air that she hadn't read it.
Larry, grab that mic and put it actually in front of
And
you.
I was pretty shocked by that until I realized that most people in the Senate or in the House who voted for this bill also did not read the bill. Mike Flood of Nebraska also said he didn't read one of the provisions in the bill. It just seems so basic to me. If you're going to vote on life-changing rules, regulations, laws for our nation, that you need to read what you're voting for before you do it. Now it's starting to come out that really they didn't have a lot of time. It's a 11 or 1,200 page bill, and some of the people, when the final thing was set up, only had a day or less to read that entire thing and understand it. I don't expect that a congressman, we'll leave Ms. Greene specifically to the side for the moment, that a congressman or woman is going to have that ability to fully understand this. So the whole thing throws off a notion of, hey, let's ram this through so nobody really knows what's going on. There are all kinds of other things that are going to pop up in here. I want to go back to something Joe raised. Now, when you seek an injunction against the federal government for a particular action they've taken that violates the United States Constitution, and you're just an ordinary citizen, very seldom does a federal judge require you to file an injunction bond to get that thing. And of course, the cost of such a bond would be prohibitive, even if you got a very clear, winnable case. And so when you say, as this bill will, that those injunction bonds are going to be way more common, then what you're doing is cutting off the ability of the average American to fight for their constitutional rights. So the judge grants the injunction, but then puts a bond on it which the plaintiff can't pay. It's like they never filed the suit in the first place. So that is a very big chunk. And again, it's buried in this act, which is supposed to be about budgetary matters only, has nothing to do with budgetary matters at all, and it will change your right to make a complaint about what the federal government does to you. One final thing. The Republican Party used to be an organization, as I recall, that was for government having less power over us. And that seems to have changed. Now, it is pretty hard to get to an autocratic dictatorship without ignoring that idea. There's a lot of evidence that that's where some people in this country would like to take us. But I am kind of shocked. I think Ronald Reagan is kicking the walls of his casket as we speak. He must be saying, wait a minute. This was my thing. Get the government off our backs. And now the government will do whatever it wants, and you can't even file a case in federal court without being made to bear some unbearable cost.
Mr. Barrett.
Well, I think that the process by which bills are passed through the United States Congress is fundamentally broken, and that's not. One party doesn't have a monopoly on that. That has been going on for years. Mike and I, when we introduce legislation in the state legislature and we vote on bills, we don't have the ability to throw things in these bills that are not germane to the original purpose of the bill. And I think Congress needs to go in that direction. When you look at the REINS Act, and Mike made a great point about the rulemaking review process in West Virginia, and I think it's as fundamental as this: is that should elected officials have a say in what the executive branch wants to do through some bureaucrat. And I think they should, because the Congress answers to voters. The members of the House answer to voters every 2 years. The members of the Senate answer every 6 years. If you don't like the decision they're making, then get a better congressman. You can't get a better bureaucrat. The general public and the voters across this country don't have a say in who the bureaucrats are. So I think the REINS Act is important, and as Mike said, it kind of mirrors what we're doing in West Virginia through our rulemaking review process. Anytime that the federal government steps on states' rights, especially for a period of 10 years, I expect conservatives to have heartburn over that. And I understand that the states that have done this now are more liberal states, but that doesn't take away from the fundamental fact that an element of this bill, again, steps on states' rights. Republicans are supposed to be for states' rights, as I am, and I think that this goes a little far as it relates to that. As far as the ICE agents, I think that I think it's been made very clear across this country that people believe that we have, and we do have, an illegal immigration problem. And I think that the people of this country would far rather have more immigration agents than they would 84,000 IRS agents. So I think that cracking down on illegal immigration is something that is widely supportive. I'm supportive of, and I think that the general public supports. So I'm going to disagree with a little bit of the comments that kind of led off with this bill passes as is. I think there are some changes that would come from the Senate. I think that some of the cuts to the FMAP and the Medicaid are probably not going to be there. I do think there are going to be some cuts to SNAP. I would think some of the things that I just spoke about are either tweaked or removed from the final passage of the bill.
Final 2 minutes goes back to you, Joe.
Well, bravo, Jason, on states' rights. It's easy to dismiss what states like California does, but it is the fifth largest economy in the world, and many of the federal regulations that are on the books today originated as state regulations in California, and that could be said for other states too. So I applaud your concerns about the infringement on state rights. 10 years, a moratorium of 10 years seems to be a little bit much. And with regard to the REINS Act, so you guys are advocating for more bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy in terms of federal regulation, which surprises me, again, coming from conservatives. Congress has shown they cannot act on emergent matters. They can't even, this bill has consumed the entire Congress now for months. It will continue to do so. And federal regulations in the background have been pushed to the background, and we're going to now have Congress, trying to legislate in this area in minutia, which is a recipe for disaster. There's a reason why we had a Chevron doctrine for over 50 years. It's the recognition that in many respects, Congress is unable to get into the minutia regarding a lot of these federal regulations. And it had to be delegated to the federal agencies that are under the thumb of the executive. So there's still political influence here, but there's a recognition that Congress can't do it all. So if you ever look at the Code of Federal Regulations, it is a massive book of regulations, many volumes. And to expect Congress to take that on while these folks are raising money and running for office every 2 years is a bit much, I think.
Joe, on that note, we got to stop.
Okay.
Appreciate the leadoff job once again, and we are at the top of the hour. Bill Stubblefield, Jason Barrett on the clock. This is Talk Radio, WNR Martinsburg and TV10. Co-hosts on the 81st commemoration of D-Day, the Admiral Bill Stubblefield, who was actually born before D-Day. Bill, good morning to you.
I was born before D-Day. I was a child. I do not remember D-Day. I I have a lot of relatives that were part of it. So yeah, I'm going to kind of pick up on the theme of the military. But
Well, don't start yet. I didn't introduce everybody.
I
just yet.
thought you did. You mentioned my name, and I thought that was it.
I just thought that I would say good morning to you first.
Bill's
On
like
my
a
birthday.
racehorse. He's ready to go.
He's in the stall.
Ding, 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 ding.
And Mike's trying to pull me backside. I don't want that subject. Go to another subject.
Let's welcome back Attorney at Law Larry Schultz. Mr. Schultz.
Good to be here.
And he is the Senate Finance Chairman, Jason Barrett.
Thanks for having me back.
Caucus Chairman in the House of Delegates, Michael Hornby.
Good morning.
And
Good morning, boss.
now, Bill Stubblefield.
I can
Now the
talk.
gate's
I
open.
can talk now. The gate's open. Charge ahead. Okay. Yeah. And my subject deals with a great big beautiful bill, but only one part of it. Ever since Ronald Reagan, the Department of Defense has been kind of sacrosanct. It's nobody really challenges it. You ask and it grows. It keeps growing. And currently in 2025. Nearly 13% of our federal budget is directed toward Department of Defense, over nearly $875 billion. This includes operations, personnel, research and development, and other defense-related activities. In 2026, with our cutbacks in a lot of things, DOD will be getting a 13% increase, totaling over $1.1 trillion for their budget. $1.1 trillion. In addition to that, Congress will probably add another $26 billion for Air Force and Space Forces. A lot of money going to DOD. Recently, in fact, last week, we saw the Ukrainians use drones very, very, very effectively. My question is, and I'm not saying it be done overnight, but my question is, should we be looking at another way to protect ourselves and to provide vehicles and avenues for the Department of Defense? The Ukrainians have shown they could do it on a small scale. Can it be done on a much larger scale, as opposed to spending $1.01 trillion in kind of business as usual? It reminds me a little bit of going back, this is before my time, Rob. A lot of money was put in battleships because that's a way to wage war. That was the case during the First World War. They realized during the Second World War it was an ineffective way to conduct battle. Are we at a point now that we should be looking at more innovative, hopefully more cost-efficient ways of doing business, of conducting war?
Joe Ferretti, you go first.
Yeah, Bill, that's kind of the lesson coming from this Ukraine war, is that we are developing war by proxy. And by proxy, I mean by use of artificial intelligence and use of machines. These drones that the Ukrainians are using, some of them are being manufactured in people's garages. This is not a big Pentagon project or system that is developing these weapons. These are homemade drones that are being used to deliver munitions, resupply the lines. They're using them to map minefields and certainly using them for reconnaissance. So I think that's the war of the future, and that's what we're learning. The Ukrainians ran out of old Russian military equipment after the first year and quickly adapted. And what they pulled off here just a few days ago in bombing remote Russian military sites, some as far away as 10 and 11 time zones from Ukraine, shows you the capability of this war by proxy. So I hope and I trust that the smart people in the Pentagon are taking notice of this, and I hope and trust that congressional budget, the budgeting that's being done for Department of Defense is being directed towards the war of the future, because that's what we're learning from this battle with Russia and Ukraine.
Michael Hornby.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where you get they're being made in the garages, Joe, but these are state-of-the-art drones, and America and the European Union has given billions and billions of dollars of weaponry to Ukraine, and that could include drones. Bill, I think in a back room somewhere in the United States, we have probably the most state-of-the-art weaponry, and that we haven't even looked at yet. We wouldn't be giving our best and most cloaked stuff over to Ukraine. So I think we have already developed this kind of thing. Whether it affects the budget, I do think when I looked at the budget, it was 20% to Department of Defense, like you said, it was 12 to 13, but it was an increase up to about 20%, I believe, which is still less than the debt. The debt is much higher than that. So I do think the one thing I thought was ridiculous was when the media said, Russia can call this their Pearl Harbor, but Ukraine's been provoked. Pearl Harbor was unprovoked. Ukraine's been under attack for 3 years, so I think by them defending themselves against these bombers, I don't think they did anything wrong. I don't think it's a Pearl Harbor, and I do think this technology is coming from the EU as well as America.
Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I agree that it's not a Pearl Harbor, and one of the reasons it's a different thing, and that we don't hear very much talk about is that on a daily basis for weeks, months, years now, Russia has been bombing not military sites, but civilian sites in Ukraine, blowing up buildings, killing people, blasting refugee centers and all kinds of places. That this was the Ukraine attack, by contrast, was directly at the tools of war, not at civilians sitting in their homes. And the media, while they're talking about the topic that Bill has raised here, is sometimes talking about that, but not as much as I would prefer, because attacking the other guy's machines is a whole lot different from attacking the other guy's civilians. And the Russians have been doing this from the beginning. I tend to agree with Mike that I certainly hope that the Department of Defense has been on this for quite some time. If not, then we're going to need someone to go into that outfit with a chainsaw and get rid of a lot of people. We're not likely in the future to have a whole lot of 1.4 million man ground wars in foreign countries. I don't believe. I believe a lot of our war activity is going to be carried out through the air. A lot more of it is now already, and probably even more. And if you have the precision and the technology to go to, for example, the building where the Russian generals are, and you're Ukraine, then the day's going to come when they're going to go to the building where the Russian generals are.
I still think you need that ground game, right, Larry? I mean, the ground. You look at Gaza. You look at. That's why Russia has been failing to actually take over Ukraine, is because they can't get their ground forces where they need to. So, you can bomb it as much as you want, but the ground force has to come eventually.
Sure, because you have to occupy.
You have to occupy it. Yeah,
which is almost impossible.
But it used to be that was basically all we had. Once you got off the ocean and onto the land, all we had was the ability to march in with more people than the other guy and make attacks and slowly start encroaching on the ground. What I'm saying is that's going to be made easier to do if you can immobilize their defenses ahead of time. You won't need quite as many people to march across their country if they don't have any airplanes to fly over you because you blew them all up with your drones. That is going to make a big difference. The Department of Defense, in these giant cuts that are in the big, beautiful bill, is basically untouched. Their waste, fraud, and abuse, if it exists anywhere, it's in the Department of Defense. There is being ignored, pointedly ignored, by this bill. And, of course, we are going to, as we did the last time Mr. Trump was president, run deficits that will show us just exactly what we did ignore. And that's kind of a shame. I do believe, though, that we're on our way, at least, though that we're not going to talk about it publicly, we're on our way to becoming very, very good at this sort of drone use.
Mr. Barrett.
Well, I want to push back a little bit on the premise that the United States of America has to look to Ukraine for innovation. I would certainly hope that our military, and to Bill's point, $900 billion or $1 trillion, that we shouldn't have to do that. That we should be innovative enough already. And I hope that, as has been characterized as smart people at the Pentagon, are I would hope way ahead of Ukraine and everyone else as it relates to military innovation and efficiency. As far as the budget goes to the Department of Defense, I think the federal government clearly has a number one obligation of protecting the people of the United States. That doesn't mean, however, that we should send unlimited amount of money to the Department of Defense, and we shouldn't, and that we should not look to create efficiencies. We should do that across government in all agencies, and I don't think that the Department of Defense is any different than that. However, that is the top obligation of the federal government, is to protect the citizens. But I would just come back to that the amount of money that has been spent in the military, that we have the number one military in the world, and that we should have all the innovation that is out there anywhere as it relates to military weaponry and strategy.
Comes back to you, Bill, to wrap it up.
Yeah, and I agree with what Jason said. I think there's another element to this that's not been mentioned, is that Department of Defense extends in every state as far as development, research and development, and production. So it's going to be very hard for the Congress to take a hard look at what can be cut from DOD, but there's a tremendous amount of waste in DOD, and I use Ukraine as an example of where a country admittedly fighting for their life now was able to use very inexpensive innovation to at least delay the Russia's attack. I'm not saying we should go to drones overnight. I'm just saying that the Ukraine demonstrated what can be done, at least in one small sector.
Issue number 3, Senator Jason Barrett.
Well, thank you. Recently, Governor Morrissey has requested a waiver from the USDA to prevent SNAP benefits from covering sodas. Do you agree with that step? And if so, what else should be done to ensure taxpayer dollars are spent on nutritional foods? If you disagree with the request of that waiver, why?
Jason, were there any other restrictions other than sodas in that waiver?
And some states have requested additional restrictions. Governor Morrissey's waiver request to USDA was only for soda.
Let's incorporate that as part of the discussion, too. Should it have been broader in its restriction requests? Larry Schultz, take the whole thing on.
Well, what I would like to see Governor Morrissey do before he starts picking the menu, I don't necessarily disagree that soda shouldn't be on there, is to push back with our elected representatives about the cuts that Mr. Moore and Ms. Miller just voted for that are going to hit SNAP. Certainly one way you can enforce the no sodas plan is to make sure nobody has enough money to afford soda, even with the SNAP. And they're passing cuts right now in this bill, and I believe that both of our Congress people voted for those very cuts to SNAP. I would like to know what Governor Morrissey has said to them about that, because somewhere in the list of foods there has to be something that Governor Morrissey would agree that a family ought to be able to buy with SNAP. And how are they going to do it if they've been cut in a time when food prices are rising? So, to me, this whole thing about soda is performance art and has nothing to do with the actual problems facing SNAP families in West Virginia.
Michael Hornby.
So who should be on SNAP, Larry? I mean, if I don't work and I should just have SNAP for the rest of my life, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, I think the work requirement for SNAP is excellent. I'm going to go to Jason's question now. My dad used to work at Johnny's, and he would come home extremely frustrated because people would come in on Fridays with their SNAP benefits and they'd buy crab legs. And that really irritated him. He's a 70-year-old man. He was cantankerous, and he makes $15 an hour, and he's never been on SNAP. He doesn't do that kind of thing. They just started getting Social Security, and he doesn't even like that. But it irritated him to no end, and I get what he's saying. Is soda bad for you? Well, is is some of the juices out there. How far do we go? Do we ban all cranberry juice because it's got red dye on it? Or there's
that.
Yeah, right.
Thanks, Jason.
So there are things that while it has good intentions, I think it is good, but I think we should limit it to fresh food, and that's what we need to go with. SNAP should be fresh food, bread, vegetables, meat, and that's it.
Fruit.
You mean,
I mean,
like bakery fresh bread, or
bread.
just bread?
Bread's fine.
Okay.
I'm fine
Yeah.
with it. Doesn't have to be freshly made.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm fine with the basics. Eggs, vegetables, fruit, protein, something like that. We need to get people to want to get off SNAP. That should be an emergency, in my opinion. It shouldn't be for crab legs and lobster tails.
Mr. Stubblefield.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with SNAP as what I should be, and so I'm having a hard time formulating an argument. I think Mike's making a good point. Where I find somewhat disturbing is that we use it as a punitive, that where you can get SNAP, but you cannot buy this, you cannot buy that. If you want to take it as more of a restrictive, that you're limited to buy just bread and fruit, and that's one way. But if you use it the way it is right now as a punitive, you can buy this drink, but you cannot buy that drink. I fundamentally have a problem with that. That's too much like Big Brother's watching. Big Brother dictates what you can and cannot do.
Joe Ferretti.
Well, yeah, and speaking to that bill, I think the federal government kicked back the governor's waiver request by saying, well, what do you mean by sodas? Does that include sweetened iced teas and other foods that have high sugar or fructose content? A lot of fruit juices have more sugar than the sodas. Mm-hmm. So, what are we talking about here? And it's typical, they submitted a waiver and it didn't have a lot of meat on the bones, and they leave it to the feds to try to figure out what the heck does the governor want. And correct me if I'm wrong, fellas, we have two legislators in the House this morning. Didn't the legislature try to ban soda and candy with regard to SNAP, and it failed to get out of the House?
No, I think we put a tax on it, Joe.
Well, there was, we had Seth on the program. There was some bill somewhere that was considering the banning of candy and sodas from SNAP benefits midway through the session. Because Seth was predicting grocery stores in the Panhandle will go out of business because you were going to cut back on what people could spend money on.
Well, SNAP benefits are federal, right? Mm-hmm. So Patrick Morrissey has to ask for a waiver or do something like that. We can't legislate that.
Correct.
Yeah, well, the legislature could pass a law and seek a federal waiver on that too. I thought the legislature had tried to do it, but it didn't get out of a committee in the House. But regardless, I just find it interesting that while our legislators and governor are down there drinking Cokes and Diet Cokes by the gallon, they're going to deny
at
other
least.
Virginians.
Yeah.
And is there a daily food allowance? Is that money actually state tax dollars that's being spent for those Cokes?
For which Cokes?
For the legislators' Cokes?
Which Cokes are we getting?
The Cokes that he's just talking about.
I don't know anything about these Cokes.
Oh, well,
I drink water.
Okay, but what Joe was saying is that they're
we get a
do
per
they
diem.
drink sodas and you get a per diem
for
sure
whatever kind
and
of
that's
meals we need.
My taxpayer dollars, yours too.
Yep.
Everybody's taxpayer dollars
that we're working for.
Sure,
Yeah.
Right.
And so if a SNAP person has a job, then they get soda.
Well, you're
Under the
getting
Morrissey
SNAP,
plan?
You're getting SNAP because you qualify for it. Just because you have a job and the money that you make at that job, you can spend however you want. But I think that when we look at this, SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program.
Keyword nutritional.
Nutritional. And I was there when Secretary Kennedy said, Governor, if you put this waiver request in, we're going to approve it. Now, maybe it wasn't specific enough to exactly define which drinks, but the point of this was about taxpayer money and where it goes. And it's not just about on the front end of the cost of purchasing food that is unhealthy, but it's also on the back end. We've talked about Medicaid a lot this morning, and here we're using taxpayer money to go out and purchase foods that are unhealthy, that are making people sick. We have one of the unhealthiest states in the country, and we have so many people on Medicaid. So the taxpayer money is being used to fill them full of unhealthy foods, making them sick, causing disease, and then the taxpayers pay for Medicaid to cover their health care. So, I think that the government certainly has an obligation to make sure that people that qualify for SNAP that need this assistance, that they get it, but they use it on foods that are healthy for them to ultimately make our society more healthy and get folks less dependent on government money for Medicaid. One of the things that the state has done that we've spent money on is SNAP Stretch, where if you qualify for SNAP, and then if you go out and purchase the foods that Mike is talking about, fresh fruits and vegetables, that there is a multiplier effect on those dollars when you go out and purchase healthy things. That's what we should be incentivizing. But we can't ignore the fact that taxpayers are paying for unhealthy foods that cause disease and other issues, other health issues, and then ultimately the taxpayers are paying for the medical coverage to fix those problems that the taxpayer money caused in the first place.
Mike, why would your dad be irritated that people were buying crab legs with their SNAP benefits money?
Because $19 a pound. Essentially, SNAP is an unearned benefit, right? It's a benefit. So if you are that poor and if you are that destitute and you need SNAP benefits for you and your family, is it the best use of money to be spending $20 a pound on crab legs? I think that was his point. It wasn't they were coming in and getting chicken legs and chicken thighs and feeding their family, which they could have had 14 pounds of chicken for 1 pound of crab legs. So that was his irritation. And I've always I'll go back to him coming home and just railing about that a lot. And it sat with me. And to our per diem, we do earn that. I mean, that is part of our salary.
It doesn't cover
it doesn't
the expenses that we actually have.
All right. On that note, we'll wrap up issue number 3, move on to issue number 4. And our co-hosts on the day include in studio Michael Hornby.
Good to be here.
William Stubblefield.
Thank you, Rob. Good to be here.
Lawrence Schultz, who's going to go in a moment.
Great to be here.
Via telephone, Joseph Ferretti.
Hello.
And comfortable in his old chair, Jason Barrett.
I am comfortable, actually.
Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
See, the whole thing fits.
Mike, who the hell's Mike Height?
I don't know. He's not here. Out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, issue number 4, Mr. Lawrence Schultz.
Yeah, my question is, what will the West Virginia legislature do to save nursing homes and rural hospitals when the Medicaid cuts threaten their financial stability? We have heard from Senator Capito, I believe, a few weeks ago. She told us that the idea was to shift more of the burden for Medicaid to the states. And given how dependent this state is and its people are on Medicaid, and how dependent our hospitals, especially the more rural, smaller ones, are on Medicaid and other similar programs, what's the plan in case this doesn't add up after the big, beautiful bill passes?
All right, let's start with the legislators in the room, and I'm going to go to Jason Barrett first.
Well, it's a great question, and it's something that we kind of talked a little bit earlier with Seth, and it's something that the legislative leadership has been working on it and had conversations with representatives from our federal delegation, and it is something that we're concerned about. But the conversations that I've had and what I've been told is that they don't expect any cut to FMAP as the bill passes the Senate, which would be a financial burden to the state of West Virginia if we were to continue the program as it is now. Medicaid and the Department of Human Services accounts for a tremendous amount of our state's budget. We have to fundamentally figure out a way moving forward to help get people off of benefits such as SNAP and Medicaid and giving them opportunities to be able to improve themselves, to be able to get quality jobs and careers, so that they're not so dependent on those. And that's a cultural issue that we have in West Virginia, is that the need is there for so many people to be on Medicaid. But again, for what it's worth, we've been told numerous times that the FMAP is not going to be cut. Certainly, rural hospitals and nursing homes play a tremendous role in our communities, and it's not something that we take lightly when it comes to decreased funding and not being able to allow those services to be provided across West Virginia.
Mr. Ferretti.
Well, Jason, I think that you certainly are correct in that the goal has to be to get people off of some of these assistance programs and get them productive. The concern I have is, and this was one of my topics for discussion this morning, which I did not choose, but statistically, West Virginia is lagging the country significantly in terms of generating jobs. We are, in 2023, we were 50th in terms of the number of jobs generated in the state. And in the last, from April 24 to April 25, we are lagging the national average in terms of job generation by a great magnitude. In fact, we are negative. I think it turned out to be minus 100 in terms of the jobs generated just in the past year. So while the goal is laudable, the reality is that we're not creating the conditions for people to get off this assistance by getting a job, because the jobs aren't being generated. So I fear that is a hurdle we're going to have to clear if we're going to meet this goal of getting people off of SNAP, off of Medicaid, and having them able to get a job that includes health benefits, which is another matter altogether. A lot of new jobs don't include health benefits. So it's something that we're going to have to grapple with in West Virginia, but the tide has to turn in terms of job generation in order to meet the goal that you speak of.
That's an interesting stat, Joe, and it caught me by surprise because of all the new companies that have moved into West Virginia and the number in the hundreds of times we've heard this, on hundreds of jobs being created at different places around the state. Nucor, CMC, of course, you've got the continued expansion of businesses locally here in the Panhandle. Mike Hornby.
Yeah, that stat did surprise me, and especially since Secretary of State just announced that, just here in Berkeley County there were 65 registrations for new businesses. So I will look into that, Joe. I kind of agree with Jason, where we've been told this is not going to affect that. But to Larry's question, if there was a major change, I think the legislature would do what it always does: it would roll up its sleeves and it would find a solution to that issue. I am not in the healthcare field. I'm not in the healthcare committees. I don't roll in those circles. But I know I speak for the House. I know on the House side we are definitely making a plan for if that was to come. We did have a piece of legislation coming through the House that would address that. It might not have been very popular to people, but we are looking at solutions. We have work groups that are working behind the scenes every single day, whether it's on PEIA, whether it's on BRIM, whether it's on Medicaid. We are trying to work with the governor's office and with the Senate to come up with solutions that will help because unfortunately we are dependent on the federal government by 3 times our.
Admiral.
Yeah, Larry's specific question was rural hospitals, and I think the legislators have proven to be very supportive of rural hospitals. Most recently, this last session with CON, Certificate of Need, and the argument that was shot down was because it was going to impact the rural hospitals. So I think your track record is very good, Mike, in protecting rural hospitals. And I do remember the legislation referred to try to get ahead of the potential cutbacks in Medicaid, and it was shot down in the House because they felt it was premature. And also, I think the governor has committed himself to a special session should there be a significant cutback in Medicaid. So if I group all these together, one, the fact that they were legislators protecting rural hospitals, and the fact the governor said that he would call a special session, I think we have to take him at the word, Larry, and that if Medicare cuts do come through, at least the rural hospital segment will be somewhat protected.
By the way, the new jobs report just did come out, Joe, on this theme. U.S. payrolls, non-farm, jumped to 139,000 in May. The forecast was for 125,000. And Bill, you'll be happy to know that Tesla stock is up $14 today.
Well, it had nowhere to go. Yesterday was a shock.
Bill got a couple.
Hey, Rob, let me add to this discussion about West Virginia job generation, the double whammy that West Virginia potentially faces here. As I looked at the statistics, which are from the Bureau of Labor Statistics for 2023, and from DeStefano's organization for 2024, the one sector in the West Virginia economy that produced the most jobs over the past year, 3,800 jobs, was the health sector. Hospitals, doctors' offices, and nursing homes and the like. That's where we had the most jobs generated. Professional services and lumber and timbering and things of that nature, we lost jobs. So if there is Medicaid cuts, and if these rural hospitals and clinics suffer as a result, West Virginia is facing a double whammy here, because that's the one sector of the economy that is actually producing the most jobs for West Virginians.
Larry?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, as these cuts hit the local nursing homes, 76% of all the beds in West Virginia nursing homes, whether you call them rural or not, 76% of all the beds are paid for by Medicaid. And as a relatively small cut hits, the only thing that those business owners can do when they don't know if there's any other money coming from somewhere is lay off staff or start reducing staff, not hiring new staff. So the level of the care will suffer. Then there's another level if they go broke. Because if they go broke, even if you're not on Medicaid, but your relative is in there and they have an insurance policy, or you're using family money to keep them safe there, they're going to lose their bed just like the people on Medicaid will lose their bed. And so we're not going to have a heck of a lot of time before the quality of the care drops off after these cuts. And we're not going to have enough time either if the quality or if the level of the cuts is such that we can't make it up. And I just don't have a feel for that. It is good to hear that the legislature is at least discussing this matter among themselves and trying to think of how are we going to face this. Because, it could be even hundreds of millions of dollars that are going to need to be
Yeah, but that's all
refunded.
based on your theory. There's no actual proof that this is actually going to do it like that. So we have to adjust as we go. And if we just go, okay, we don't control the federal government. So as a
Right.
state legislature, all we can do is plan. So and whether those cuts are coming or not, healthcare is skyrocketing through the cost of healthcare. So we
Sure.
have to address that. We're in PEIA right now. We're in the healthcare business, so it's affecting us as a state already. So we are working on those things.
All right, issue number 5. In the Mike Carl seat is Mike Hornby. Is your topic by chance, is Joe Biden the worst president ever in the history
It
of
is
the United
not.
States?
I have forgotten about the man. I'm quite happy he is retired. No, to kind of go with what Joe was speaking about in the last segment, a state like ours with an older population, stagnant population, no real growth. 70% of our citizens are either on PEIA, Medicare, or Medicaid. A huge dependency on federal dollars, like Larry was saying. We have to work extremely hard to attract companies with good paying jobs. what role should the state play in economic development, and how do we draw the line between winners and losers?
All right. Admiral, let's begin with you.
I think it's providing the infrastructure that will be appealing to the industries we're trying to attract, and also the people. We have to address and fix our educational system. That is, I think, basic. We have to address and fix our child welfare system. We've got to address and fix our PEIA. Some of these things that we talk about on a regular basis, Mike, is something that you're aware of, all of us are aware of, we need to do. We tend to get caught up on the fact that we want to recruit a business. We want to make it tax friendly. We want to make it regulation friendly. That's important to be that. But you also have to look at these other issues, the ones that I've just mentioned. And you ask, are we in a position to choose winners and losers? I'm not sure that's a question. The question is, do we have sufficient infrastructure that will be appealing to an industry that come in to know that their children will receive a good education, that there will be sufficient health care, there'll be sufficient insurance, all these things that a young family is looking for. That's what we have to provide.
Joe Ferretti.
Well, amen, Bill. We are a state that still has 1 out of 6 households without broadband. And if you're coming in with a company in the workforce for tomorrow and your employees don't have internet connections and access, that's a real impediment. There's games being played now about Starlink and the money that was already allocated for broadband expansion in West Virginia. It's shameful that is being held up and it's still being played with when the money's there to get fiber optic in the ground. So I'm hoping that gets resolved. And the other thing, Mike, your general question is government involvement in business development and attracting businesses. I think that's a necessary game these days because the states are in competition, and that competition is fierce to get these businesses to locate. But there's a cautionary tale in all this too, and that's why I think that we have to be very careful in how we allocate our economic development dollars. A lot of these pilot programs are boondoggles. Studies show, and I can cite you the studies that show that these companies make decisions about location and then afterwards approach the local governments to extract pilot programs and other economic goodies as part of the deal. That happens more often than we'd like to know. And I think the government has to be very scrutinizing in how they grant these economic development funds and these pilot programs for some of these industries. And I think that's if that's being done, I feel a lot better. But I will concede the competition is out there, that all the states are doing it, and we have to do it too. I just hope that we're being very careful in who we give the economic incentives to, because sometimes it's been the case. These companies come in, and within a year they fold up, and they've never paid a dime of taxes, and they've taken money for roads and bridges and have produced nothing for the state.
Senator Jason Barrett.
Well, I think when you look at companies like Nucor and P&G, I don't think that you're going to see them pick up and move. I mean, the amount of investment that they have in those huge facilities in the two respective areas of the state clearly indicate that they're going to be here very long term. I think that in the beginning, several years ago, when we really started to get into this game, and it's an unfortunate game that has to be played because Joe's right. The competition is out there for other states. And I've been in some of the meetings with some of these companies who are looking at some of our border states, some states that are a little further away than our border states, but they are very open a lot of times about some of the things that are being offered in other states. And again, it's this necessary evil that we wish we didn't have to play. We wish that we just had a tax, it was just based on our tax structure and on other things, and we could create a tax policy in our state that would just appeal to companies to come locate here, and that's ideally the way to go. But the unfortunate reality is what these other states are offering. In order to be competitive, you have to offer those. One of the examples that's being used now is a reason not to do these are the green buses, and because of them going under. And there was a time, I think, a number of years ago when we really started to get into this, where the development office and the Department of Economic Development was really looking to lure companies, was aggressive in doing that, and probably gave out more incentives than they should have. And I remember we had interims a couple of years ago at Kakapen, and we rode one of the green buses from Kakapen over to Martinsburg, and on the way back we went the back way. We went up 51 West over the mountain, and that way through the valley to Morgan County. As we were going up 51 West, at the top of the mountain there, Jaredstown, where the turnaround is, or Glengarry, where the turnaround is, I literally could have gotten out of that bus and ran up that hill faster than that damn bus was going. And that's not a joke. I really didn't think it was going to make it up the hill. And at that point, I knew that something was wrong here, because what we call a mountain in Berkeley County is a small hill in the rest of the state. And I knew those buses weren't going to be a great thing in the state, traveling on some of our through our terrain and our topography. But I say all that to say that I believe that the development office in our state is now far more selective and requiring more of these companies to have more skin in the game. I don't think that we're just giving out a lot of we're not giving away the farm the way that we may have a number of years ago, because we have shown to be aggressive, and we've landed some of these whales as it relates to these large companies that are going to employ a lot of people, making huge investments, that now we're on the radar for a lot of these companies to come to West Virginia. So there were bumps and bruises along the way, but I think we're getting a better handle on making strategic investments or incentives to some of these companies.
Larry, you have 90 seconds.
Yeah, one of my first questions is Procter & Gamble, Amazon, Quad, Nucor, name all these companies that have come here. They're certainly providing, from what I understand, pretty good wages. Do they provide health care coverage for their employees?
They do.
So paid company health care. Because if you don't do that, then you have wasted the whole thing, because you're never going to get out from under that sort of thing. It's always going to be a challenge, as long as as Bill said, as long as our education system is 50th. Because everybody looks at that, if they don't know our state or know the great work ethic that a lot of West Virginians have, they're going to look at that and say, oh boy, what we do isn't rocket science, but it's complicated enough that do we really want to take this risk? And it will be interesting to see how the development office succeeds, because without solving that, I do agree, without solving that, West Virginia never takes another step. We stay in the same place, walking in place forever.
Comes back to you, Mr. Hornby.
Yeah, well, I agree with Bill and Larry. I think $3 billion that we spend on education. That's why this bill putting education under legislative rulemaking review is so important, and obviously they all agree with me. So we can end the show with that.
I like the way that you weaved that in there at the end. You're trying to get the Admiral going, I think.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the solid endorsement, and Larry.
That sounds like a one big beautiful bill sell.
It's a big beautiful bill.
It was hidden in there. Nobody knew about it.
Let the record say that you and I still have active discussions on this.
Yeah, and I think one of the parts that we didn't really explore too much, Mike, that I think we're hoping we would get into a bit is, should the state be active in acquiring properties to help with economic development?
To sell, to develop, to site-ready properties that we can bring in these companies and go, you don't get any incentives, but here, buy the building.
And that's what Berkeley County has done, and done it very successfully.
Yes.
That's how we got Macy's, that's how I got Procter & Gamble, and the list goes on.
Yes, good point there. And we are back with final thoughts. You get 8 seconds apiece. We have final thoughts, 8 seconds apiece. Joe Ferretti, go first.
A bridge too far would be to restrict SNAP beneficiaries from buying the moonshine.
Mr. Schultz.
I don't like the Steelers, but here's my heart goes out to all their fans who are in such tumult today.
Mr. Stubblefield.
It's been fun having our two legislators a part of the Friday Five today. They've been good.
Mr. Hornby.
Elon, Donald, let's sort this out. Come on, Tesla stock's got to come back. Bill's in a bad mood today.
Jason, you got cut off because Mike overtook your time on that one.
Great.
Dave Ramsey Show is next. This is Talk Radio, WR Ultimate Mogul Power Move. WRR Martinsburg will talk to you in 70 short hours.